So I actually wanted to start off with this. As you can tell, and for some of you, it's been a while now since you've known it, I'm a Christian. But I've always wanted to give you guys the context as to why I became one in the first place. I've only been this way for about a year and a half now, so this change of my life has been pretty recent. But I think you guys can relate to me when I say, yeah, I grew up in the church, as many of you have. It was a friendly environment for me, but was basically like another school subject. I'd get the Bible put in one ear, only for it to get thrown out the other when I got home, meaning that I always grew up believing in God, sure, but I never truly got to know Him for who He is. My life with Him in my childhood was basically amounting to praying to Him daily, and that was it. Later on in my teenage years, though, I would really start to mold my life into my own image. I became one of the people to live life on my own terms. For me, that meant a life of seeking all the pleasure I can. I wanted a life of maximal pleasure and minimal pain. This led me to many sinful behaviors that I didn't even know were that bad at that time. Again, I didn't know God for who He is, so I didn't get to know what He thought of me. It was these behaviors that corrupted me and began tormenting my life. Like, okay, guys, do you ever think about how sinful addictions tend to create their own negative feedback loop? You get drawn into them, and then they corrupt you, and then they make your life miserable, so you depend on them even more in order to give your life pleasure to fight that pain. In other words, sin creates the very problem it offers to solve. I think it's fair to say I can't be the only one that's felt that way. But this burdensome lifestyle that I was working on, it was basically me committing to myself to fulfill myself, and it only led me down a darker path. But I mean, hey, the world tells us to believe in ourselves, right? Well, believe me when I say I did that. I tried that. I really did. And it's just, no matter how hard I was trying, I could never really fix myself. I was just ever consuming, but always left hungry, ever seeking, but never finding, ever yearning, but never truly being satisfied. So, after 5 years or so of things not getting any better, but worse, I became more susceptible to the darker thoughts in life. I resolved in myself for the longest time that I would never be one of those guys to get depressed. It just wasn't going to be me. But that's why it really shocked me when at age 20, I matched the symptoms. Anxiety also was thrown on top of that, and, well, throw the constant stress in there too. For me, I felt flat. Sometimes it was like I had lost the capacity to feel anything at all. There were specific times when a situation would happen and I knew I should be feeling something, some kind of emotion, but I just wasn't. It was like a numbness or a fog. And God, He was just, well, He was a foreign concept to me at that time. All I did was talk to Him every once in a while. Very casual, too. I had stopped going to church. And on top of that, my one of my deliveries, I actually told God plainly that I didn't care about Him and that I hadn't for a long time. I remember one day, though, where I merely asked Him for some kind of a relationship with Him. I had no idea what that was actually like. All I had was a small flicker of curiosity. So during my adult age, at age 20, that was where this all accumulated. I was at the height of my misery, or, well, maybe I should call this the lowest of depths. I hit the point where I had pretty much tried everything. I began to think that, well, maybe this is just the way that I am, and this is going to be my life. I'm going to be a husk for the rest of my days. And that's when the death thoughts started coming in. I call them that because it would take place during my deliveries where I would be always driving my car. And it came to my mind that I could die at any day. It wouldn't even have to be my fault. All it would take is for an oncoming driver to make one mistake. I was rolling the dice of death every day. We all are. I rolled for life so far, but what's going to happen to me when I roll the skull? Now, as one thinks about their death, they may start to think about what happens after. I don't know how you guys react to those kind of thoughts personally, but I do know my own ways of coping with it. Mine was pushing it off and procrastination. I knew that if I had died and faced God, knowing all the stuff that I had done before, I was going to be casted into hell without a saving chance. So, of course, I would push it off for months. After all, why would I actually try and do something about the problem by going to God about it? Well, October of 2021 was exactly when I did that. My mom had invited me to this new church that she had been going to, so I went there. So I went and hurt her feelings. Little did I know that that was what God would be doing with me there. Like, he'd be starting to change me there, basically. It was a Wednesday night where all that happened was worship music and prayer. As the music was going on, I was mumbling along to the words on the screen, but then this conviction just kind of came out of nowhere and overwhelmed me. It was like the weight of the world was bearing over my chest, over my shoulders, and I realized that moment the entire life that I'd lived so far, it was filled with nothing but self-seeking pleasure and misery. I was a guilty soul, and yet, despite me living apart from Him for so long, God, He still loved me. He still wanted me. After all those years of sinning and departure from God, I had done all of that, and yet He still, in that moment, loved me. So, yeah, that raw feeling of true love was the most powerful conviction I've ever gotten. It was nearly impossible for me to cry for years, and yet I couldn't stop myself from utterly weeping. As the prayers began and everyone went into their own circles, I simply crumbled down to my seat, and in desperation, I said this. I said, Jesus, I am so terrified of my life. I don't want to be one of those people who thinks that they're okay, but then dies and ends up getting cast to hell. Please, you have to do something about me. I am so scared of my mind. I feel like it's wired for self-destruction, and it pulls me away from you. Please, Jesus, I will do anything for you. Please save me from my life. Please save me from myself. Well, rest assured that my mother gave me the warmest hug as we were both weeping together that night. But yeah, after that, my life went back to normal pretty much. Still doing the same sinful things that I was addicted to, and still loathing myself. A lot of it was on VR chat, as you guys can understand. If you know, you know. But one thing had changed since that night. I had finally lost all faith in myself. All I had left was Jesus, whoever he was. I remember on a drive home that I spoke to Jesus and told him that, well, he's the only one who can do something about me at this point, because I had no other options left. I tried everything. It was February of last year. That was when the true life change kicked into motion. The thought had kicked into my mind that my faith in Jesus is like a muscle. It's something that I can actually work on and get better at. So at that point, I wanted to get closer to Jesus and actually trust Him with my life. I wanted to get to know Him. So I would start talking to Him every day and asking Him for a relationship together. I wanted to know Him for who He really is. As I was doing that, I also started reading the Gospel of John, which is all about what Jesus said and did. As I was listening to the words of Jesus, I was getting this unexplainable hunger for Him. I wanted more and more of Him as I got to know Him through the words that He spoke. No one had ever spoken like Jesus before, guys. I would get times where I would get so excited just by listening to Him. My mind was being restored and renewed as I was being taught the truth about reality. Like, just in a matter of a couple of weeks, the depression and stress and anxiety were melting away as the new joy was bubbling up within me that I couldn't explain. Never in my life have I ever had something like this happen before, and there's no reason why delving into some religious figure is suddenly going to cure me of all this stuff. But that was what was happening to me, so I was blown away by Jesus. I was blown away by the power Jesus had over my life as He was healing me and restoring me. And the joy, it kept going on. it just wouldn't stop. Week after week, I wouldn't stop. It just wouldn't stop as I got to enjoy the words of God. It was at this point that I had realized that there was no going back from here. And so I committed myself to leaving my life of sin and trusting Jesus with all of my heart. For some of you guys, you may have actually been there with me as that transformation process was taking place. If you were one of the friends who saw me slowly becoming more and more joyful and growing a love for God, and suddenly one day telling everyone that I was going wholesome from now on, well, then you get what I'm talking about. But what really mattered to me wasn't the happy feelings or the transformation. Those were byproducts of the true reality I was facing. What mattered to me the most was that God had completely forgiven me of all I had ever done, forever. There is no greater reality than this. As Jesus said, "Whoever hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life and will not be judged, but has crossed over from death to life." Now that I trusted him, I get to be with Christ for eternity in vibrant life. Here on earth, the greatest songs, the most nostalgic memories, and the most beautiful worlds in VR chat are only glimpses, hints at what everlasting life is going to be like. That excitement absolutely changed my life. And of course, I wanted to share that truth with everyone I knew. I wanted those I cared about, the friends that I cherished the most, to be saved by Jesus Christ and to have everlasting life themselves. Which brings us to today.